Let's talk a little today about women and some of the reform movements of the early to mid 1800s. Women were hugely influential in a lot of the stuff that was changing in our country in the 1830s, 40s, 50s, and all the way, well, really all the way up through the early 1900s. Um, One of the big things that dominated the lives of women during this time was something called the cult of domesticity. It wasn't really a group, it was more of an idea that really women should stay in the home and women's primary job was to take care of the kids. This was the dominant way in which people thought of women and really in which women thought of themselves. And this is really one of the ideas that's really kind of being fought against in a lot of the reform movements that have to do with women in the 1800s. One of the things that women fought ferociously for was abolition. The abolition movement, in large part, was comprised of women. There were certainly male leaders and there were males who took part in it, but a lot of the folks who got really active in the movement were women. Folks like Sarah and Angelina Grimke, folks like Lucretia Mott, um, and they were largely Christian women. Really, without women, without Christians, abolition really doesn't happen. Those were a lot of your foot soldiers, a lot of the people who were active in society to try to get rid of the institution of slavery. Another movement that achieved success was the women's temperance movement. It was the movement to ban alcohol. And finally, this is what ends in prohibition in the early 1900s. So, where abolition, slavery is ended with the Civil War in the 1860s, temperance takes a little bit longer. But eventually, the women win their fight and they get the United States to pass a constitutional amendment which ends the drinking of alcohol. One of the leaders in this, Mary C. Vaughan, was one of the women. But one of the guy who actually started it was actually a guy, Lyman Beecher. He was a minister out of New England. Way back in 1825, he starts the temperance movement, the movement to get rid of alcohol in our society, and women pick up the cause from there. But really, the big thing that women, as far as their own concerns, the big thing they work for is suffrage. Suffrage is basically the right to vote. And one of the women who's really active in this movement is a woman by the name of Elizabeth Cady Stanton. There are others, Lucretia Mott and Sojourner Truth. And you'll notice again that a lot of these folks they cross over. They are involved in more than one movement. But Elizabeth Cady Stanton is one of the organizers, along with Lucretia Mott, of the Seneca Falls Convention. It takes place in New York, and it's a convention to discuss women's rights. It takes place in a church, actually. There are more than 300 participants. Probably one of the most notable speakers at the conference, or at the convention, excuse me, is Sojourner Truth. Her real name is Isabella Baumfree, but she takes on the name Sojourner Truth. She, of course, was an abolitionist. She was a former slave, but she also spoke for women's rights. Again, I told you there's a lot of crossover in between these. And she gets up and talks about her experience as a former slave and her experiences in fighting for abolition. And again, one of the more notable speakers to come out of that convention. So again, you see the crossover between the different movements. The last cause I want to speak just briefly about is education. Again, some of the primary women who are working in this field, Sarah and Angelina Grimke, two sisters from the South, um, and their big cause is education. Like I said, you'd already seen them. They were also abolitionists, and so they cross over. They have more than one cause. These are all the same women, really. They're taking on all of these issues. And through some of their work, as well as work of others like Emma Willard and Mary Lyon, you start to see females gaining more access into school. For instance, the Troy Female Seminary, um, established by Emma Willard in New York, was an all-girls school. Um, Another all-girls school, Mount Holyoke, located in Massachusetts, founded by Mary Lyon. And then the first school to really become co-educational, where it would educate both girls and boys, guys, men and women, was a school called Oberlin College in Ohio, and is kind of groundbreaking in that field. So women gaining more and more educational opportunities as a result of reformers such as Sarah Grimke and Angelina Grimke.